This is the Rebbe's Sicha and Chayei Sara from Tafshin Beis, 1991. As we're standing in the beginning of the Kinnis Shulkim of all the Shulkim of the Frierdiker Rebbe from all over the world, we have to first declare the basis of the task of the Shulkim, specifically of this generation, and add the concept and goal that is new to the Shluchos of this time, to greet the face of Mashiach with the true and complete redemption. In general, the work, the Shluchos of the Jewish people, is to greet Mashiach in the complete redemption, and as emissaries of God Himself, we are taught that I am created to serve my Creator. So the general goal is to serve God, especially the Shulkim of the Rebbe, but with time there are added dimensions to our service of Hashem, where we have to add in our work. These added aspects become the gate and the means through which all the other deeds, the mitzvahs we do, will be elevated and raised. How much more so when the new aspect of the shulchos that is added to this specific time is such an important concept, to the point that it is the basis and the goal of Judaism in its entirety, to prepare the world to bring about the coming of Mashiach. So how much more so this should be encompassing all the details of the shulchos. And as we have said many times, especially lately, that we are holding by the end of times, and as the Frierdiker Rebbe himself said, that even the buttons are already polished, and we are all ready to greet Mashiach Tzidkenu B'Poel Mamish in an actual manner. So this is the goal of the Kinnis HaShluchim, to make hachalatais tayvais, to prepare ourselves to this specific work in this particular time of our generation. Now we'll explain the specific connection between Avodas HaShluchos, the work of the Shulchim, and the connection to the concept of Mashiach and Mashiach himself. When Hashem asked Moshe Rabbeinu to take the Jews out of Egypt, Moshe responded, Shlach na biyad tishlach, send the one that you're supposed to send. From this pasuk, we can deduce that Moshe is asking him to send Mashiach already instead of him. The Torah refers to Mashiach as a shaliach, the shaliach of Hashem, to redeem the Jewish people. The reason that Moshe asks in this manner is because, as Rashi says, Moshe knew that he wouldn't be going into the land of Israel, therefore he knew that the redemption was only going to be a temporary one and not the final redemption. So Moshe said, since this is not the final redemption, perhaps Mashiach should also do this redemption, and then maybe it will be the final one. But we have to understand that certainly Moshe, who is the optimum of the holy wisdom and understands everything and knows the Torah completely, had to know that it's not the time yet for the final redemption. He understood that Hashem chose him, so it had to be clear to him that it was not yet the time to send Mashiach. And since Hashem chose Moshe as his shaliach, why did Moshe say essentially, no, send Mashiach instead? On the other hand, since Moshe is asking for this, and the Torah is reporting it, and Moshe Rabbeinu definitely doesn't make mistakes, so why didn't Hashem listen to Moshe Rabbeinu and actually send the redemption of Egypt already through Mashiach? This question actually answers itself. This is a request from Moshe Rabbeinu. It's an important request, and the Torah is eternal, as is Moshe's wisdom. So this must have actually happened and happened for a reason. And the same shaliach that Hashem will send to take the Jews out of Egypt will actually become the final shaliach. As it says in the Midrash, Moshe Rabbeinu was the Redeemer, and he will be the last Redeemer in the future redemption. The soul of Moshe Rabbeinu is within Mashiach. So when Moshe Rabbeinu made this request, Shalach na biyad tishlach, even though he knew that Mashiach would come only later, he wanted the first Redeemer to be connected to the final Redeemer, and that the redemption from Egypt would be connected to the final redemption with Mashiach. Even though Moshe and Mashiach are two different people, Moshe is from the tribe of Levi and Mashiach is from the tribe of Yehuda, they are actually connected, and they are united through the concept of redemption that starts in Egypt and ends with Mashiach in the final redemption. So in order to understand this better, we have to understand the concept of shlichus. And in our parsha, we find the first shlichus in the Torah, the shlichus that Avraham Avinu sent Eliezer to find a shidduch for his son Yitzchak. The Parsha will describe how Avraham sent him, but also how Eliezer carried out the shlichus in actuality and fulfilled his shlichus. And there's room to inquire, what exactly was the position of Eliezer? Was he a shaliach to actually marry Rivka to Yitzchak, since a shaliach replaces the one who sends him? As we know, the halacha is maaseh shaliach, maaseh mishaleach. That the shaliach, if you send someone to do something for you, for example, if you can't be at a wedding to do the kedushin and you send a shaliach, he actually does it for you, and whatever he does is attributed to you. Or even more than that, the actions of the shaliach is not only that he does it for you, but it is actually like you are doing it. So just as Avraham is going with Eliezer, the Rebbe is going with the shaliach wherever he goes. So the whole essence and the whole being of the shaliach is like the meshaleach. The one who sent him is with him. It's not only as if he is like the meshaleach, not only representing, but he is one and the same with the meshaleach. Or if we say that Eliezer was not a shaliach and rather only a shadchan, was his role just that he has to find the right girl for Yitzchak and suggests and brings her out of his own interests? Perhaps he is paid to do so. That's to say that he has his own interests, he's just trying to do a favor for another, but he's not representing the meshaleach. At first glance, we could think that Eliezer was just a shadchan, because at the beginning he even proposed his own interests, because he proposed his own daughter to be the one chosen. And Avraham Avinu had to explain to him why it wouldn't be. And then, eventually, when he understood that, we will see from his actions later that he accepted the shlichus and became nullified to Avraham Avinu. Eliezer was the most faithful student of Avraham Avinu, and he was a great teacher of the teachings of Avraham Avinu. So much so that he was called Eved Avraham, Avraham's servant, as he was totally dedicated to Avraham. Also from his actions later, we will see that he was completely nullified and a total shaliach of Avraham Avinu. And in order to give him strength, Avraham Avinu had him swear with his mitzvah, and this shows us that Eliezer can be considered as a shaliach and was like Avraham Avinu in this mission. We will see that Eliezer is actually a shaliach from the fact that Avraham Avinu gives him all of his possessions, everything he possesses, and he was able to do it with whatever he wanted. He was able to do with those possessions whatever he wanted to do. Avraham Avinu trusted him completely with all his wealth, in order to express to Rivka how important the shidduch was to Avraham Avinu. So the Rebbe asks a question. Why would Avraham Avinu give everything? Nobody gives everything, even if you want to give most of what you have. Avraham Avinu was very, very wealthy, so even if he gave him half or most of what he had, this would have already been very impressive to anybody, including Rivka. But we see from this that Avraham Avinu considered Eliezer just like himself, and he had no doubt Eliezer's actions would be totally representative of him, and he had no reason to keep anything for himself. In other words, it would be as if he himself were going. Also, we learn from this that Avraham Avinu gave all his wealth to Eliezer and eventually to Yitzchak, not only to impress Rivka and her family, but in a deeper sense, Avraham Avinu shows, as we know from the pasuk, Yitzchak ben Avraham, Avraham Cholidet es Yitzchak, Yitzchak, the son of Avraham. Avraham begot Yitzchak. From this pasuk, Avraham Avinu shows that his whole being is within Yitzchak and his continuation and his offspring. Also, al pi nigle, we see that the marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka is not just a private wedding of two people who want to get married, but it's the first marriage of the Jewish people, within the Jewish people, and the first marriage after the mitzvah of bris milah. And through this marriage, there will be toldos, which is also the next parsha, and the continuation of the Jewish people. So in addition to this being the wedding of Yitzchak and Rivka, it's the birth of the whole Jewish people, and the wedding that belongs to the whole Jewish people. And the fact that Avraham Avinu gave all his possessions to Yitzchak underlines that this is not a private wedding, but the wedding of the entire Jewish people. And he wanted to be completely united and a part of this wedding. So he didn't need to keep any of his possessions. His entire might and wealth was given to Yitzchak and this wedding. Avraham Avinu didn't want to have anything separating himself from Yitzchak and the wedding. From this, we can see why Avraham wanted Eliezer to be a shaliach and not merely a shadchan, because he wanted to be involved in every aspect of the wedding and in the way Eliezer would choose Rivka. And this could only be done through a shaliach and not a shadchan. So Eliezer was sent on full shlichus by Avraham Avinu. So now the Rebbe goes on to explain Abraham's involvement from a spiritual aspect. In Likutei Torah, Parshas Bracha, the Alter Rebbe says that Yitzchak and Rivka's wedding is a general concept in the Seder Hishtalshelus, the chain-like descent of the spiritual worlds. That this reflects a Jew's work in this world. That his job is to unite the names Ma Uban, which represent Yitzchak and Rivka in this physical world, the masculine and the feminine worlds, the giver and the receiver, and they are to be united. Uniting the soul, which is Ma, and the body, which is Ban. The work of a Jew is to unite his soul and body, and this will be represented in the wedding of the Jewish people and Hashem. The Jewish people and Hashem are one and the same. As we will soon see in the final redemption, that the idea of connecting, of a wedding, and Ma Uban represents that Hashem and the Jewish people will be united. So this is the goal in this world, to do Torah and mitzvahs and unite Ma Uban. The chidush, the novelty of Matan Torah, was that the decree of the separation of the spiritual world and the physical world was nullified. And after this nullification, the Jews were imbued with the strength, the power to unify the spiritual and the physical, the soul and the body. And this is why we can bring holiness into physicality. And the complete revelation of this will be in the time of the final redemption. In the first stage, there will be unification, and it will be revealed that the feminine aspect is actually higher than the masculine. So the Alter Rebbe explains in Likutei Torah why the story of the Shlichus of Eliezer is discussed at length in the Torah with all of its details, and it's repeated 3 times in the Torah. It's because it's not only the Shlichus of Eliezer, but rather the beginning of the work of the Jewish people in this world to unite Ma Uban, physicality and spirituality. And this begins with the wedding of Yitzchak and Rivka. Rivka was living, as we know, as a rose amongst the thorns. She was surrounded by wicked people, the physicality of the world, Ban, and the Shlichus of Eliezer was expressed through removing her from there to unite her with Yitzchak, Ma. It was a complete dedication to Hashem, like a korban to Hashem. And that they would have children who represent the unification of Ma Uban, of uniting and infusing the physical world with Kedusha, with spirituality and holiness. This was Rivka coming from the lower worlds and Yitzchak coming from the higher worlds and uniting. The ultimate goal is to have toldos, physical offspring, and also to increase its mitzvah in mitzvahs and good deeds throughout the generations, as this is also referred to our toldos. So now we can understand how Eliezer Shlichus wasn't just a private mission, but it rather opened up the concept of Shlichus for all of us in the world to serve Hashem in this physical world for the rest of times until the final redemption, when we will merit to see the outcome of this Shlichus. We also see the depth of Eliezer Shlichus. He had all the wealth. He was coming as a very important person, but he stated that he is the servant of Avraham, and he was totally dedicated and batal to Avraham Avinu. And this represents our shlichus, to be completely dedicated and nullified to Hashem. We know that Avraham Avinu started the preparation to Matan Torah 2,000 years prior to be able to unite the physical and the spiritual. And Avraham Avinu started this with the wedding of Yitzchak and Rivka. Their wedding was the preparation for Matan Torah. And from Matan Torah on, we know that we are preparing for the final redemption. But we need more of an explanation. If the wedding is the most important aspect, why does the Torah expand so much on the Shlichus of Eliezer, which is just a preparation to meet Rivka? In fact, the Torah mentions it, like I said, 3 times. And yet the wedding is described only briefly. It seems like the longer details should have been about the wedding. So from this, we understand that the shlichus of Eliezer is essential to the unification of Ma'uban. In order to be able to unify the spiritual and the physical, you have to be, on the one hand, like Eliezer. He was an important being. He was the best student of Avraham, learned all his teachings, and went and taught them to others. Further, he had all the wealth of Avraham. So he was not only wealthy, but he felt important. His existence was of importance. Once you are important, and then you nullify it, and you become the servant of Avraham, then you truly unite with the sender, with the Mishaleach. And this is the idea of a Shaliach. Not only does he do what the Mishaleach wants, but that he is important for himself. He has his own knowledge and his own ideas, his own strength, and he nullifies that strength and puts it towards serving the Mishaleach. So a Shaliach has to be built up from two things. One, he has to have his own important Metzias existence, his own mind, on his own. And two, he has to be nullified to the Mishaleach, to the one who sends him, and realize that he is the Shaliach of someone else. And even though he has his own ideas in mind, not to change from the will and instructions of the Mishaleach. And if he ceases to do this, then he ceases to be a Shaliach of that Mishaleach, because he is not doing what the Mishaleach sent him to do. He has to keep in mind all the time that he is doing something for the Mishaleach, because Shluchai Shel Adam Kamoto, a Shaliach is like his sender. He is representing him as if the Mishaleach himself came with him, and the Mishaleach is just the same as him, and therefore he must only do in the way the Mishaleach wants. And this is the real concept of connecting the names Ma'uban. Connecting them means that the soul of a Jew, who is Ma, has to be unified in a revealed way with godliness. That the soul, which is a godly soul, a chelak elokam mamash, it's a real piece of godliness that we have in ourselves. The soul becomes the main aspect of the mission of this world, because Hashem sends the soul into the physical world, into the body, to carry out the mission of Hashem. The body is Ban, the receiver. As we say in the morning blessings, Hashem created my soul and placed it within me so that a person can achieve this connection between the soul and the body. But how? Even the way the soul is trapped in a physical body, a yesh, a person who has his own will, and the body isn't spiritual. But nevertheless, the way the physical body is, not changing the fact that it is physical, it is still able to shine the light of the soul in its physical body. The goal is that the body is to be nullified to the neshama. As it says in Tanya, the Jew has to recognize and understand that his soul is the principal thing and the body is secondary. And through this concept that the body remains a physical entity but nullifies itself to the neshama, the soul shining through and uniting with the body, it becomes one spiritual being. That when a Jew does mitzvahs, the soul and the body are working together to reveal Hashem. And this is the avoda of Torah and mitzvahs in the physical world. That mitzvahs are done through physical objects so that the revelation of the light of Hashem is not limited to the neshama in the body, but it's going to also penetrate the physical world and its surroundings. So the work that the Jew does will be revealed spiritually and physically to the point that he will shine like the sender himself, that he will be like the hand of Hashem in this physical world. And this is why we can say that Eliezer was definitely a shaliach. Every Jew is a shaliach, and when you do the work of Hashem in this world, then you are his shaliach. He initiated this path in the history of the Jewish people, of uniting Ma'uban, and he had to have done in his own life, with his own body, to shine the holiness of Hashem and the will of Avraham Avinu into this physical world. Now we can understand why Avraham gave everything he had. This shlichus encompassed everything about the creation of the worlds, the Seder Hishtalshalus, and the world of Torah and mitzvahs. The entire shluchos was based on this wedding. Avraham recognized that there's nothing else that exists besides this type of work, connecting the physical and the spiritual, and that this is the only thing that is truly important in the concept of creation. Especially that Avraham Avinu was involved in giving the Jewish people the power to connect the physical and spiritual, because it was his actions that were the preparation to Matan Torah. He had to be completely immersed in the whole process, which was why he gave everything that he had. So according to this, we can explain something wonderful. As we said, the Alter Rebbe brings this in Likutei Torah, not in Chayei Sara or Bereshis where it happened, but in the Parshas Bracha at the end of the Chumashim and in Shir Shirim. The Alter Rebbe is bringing out at the end of the Chumash and not at the beginning to hint that the story of Eliezer, the wedding of Rivka and Yitzchak, and the unification of the names of Ma'oban is the ultimate purpose of the entire creation. And right after that, the Alter Rebbe begins the Mamarim of Shir Shirim, which represents the essence of the connection, the marriage of Hashem and the Jewish people, describing the unity that will exist in the times of the final redemption. The Alter Rebbe goes on to explain that the concept that every Jew is a shaliach of Hashem, and that our job is to elevate the world until the point that one can actually see godliness in the physical world. Now we can understand why Moshe Rabbeinu said, Shlach na biyad tishlach, send the one that you're supposed to send. And we can further understand why Mashiach is a shaliach, why it's important to call him a shaliach, and what is his shluchos. Mashiach will complete what was started with the shluchos of Eliezer. The shluchos of Mashiach is to be a shaliach of Hashem and to bring the full redemption. It's to reveal the fullness of the connection between the soul and the body, and Hashem and the Jewish people in the physical world, which means that Mashiach is the shaliach to bring down the revelation of godliness in the physical world, that Hashem will have a dwelling place in this physical world. So Mashiach has to have the aspects that we discussed before, that a shaliach has to be important with his own mind, with his own mitzias, his own existence. As the Rambam brings down, that Mashiach is a descendant of King David, and he learns Torah and does mitzvahs. He knows Torah like his ancestor David, and he himself has to wage and win spiritual wars in this physical world with all of its difficulties. But at the same time, he has to be an emissary, the emissary of Hashem, and be like and represent Hashem mamish, like the long hand of Hashem in this physical world. So in order to bring all Yidden to do their task in this world, to unite and reveal their souls, it has to first be done by each individual. And we can better understand Moshe Rabbeinu's request and suggestion, Shlach na biyad tishlach, send the one that you're supposed to send, that he wanted to connect his redemption, bringing the Jews out of Egypt, to the final redemption, that those leaving Egypt should see the larger picture, connecting it to Mashiach and the unification of the spiritual with the physical. Moshe is identified with Torah. We say with Chochmaz, it's written, Moshe kibel Torah misinai. Mashiach is connected to Malchus, to royalty, ruling over the people. So this is like the difference between Mashpia and Mekabel, the sun and the moon. Moshe can learn and transmit Torah. On the other hand, Mashiach, which is Malchus, has no quality within itself, is receiving from all the other spheres. Mashiach has the same gematria as Shaliach plus 10. Mashiach is a Shaliach, but in a way that he adds the 10 Kaychais HaNefesh, the 10 soul powers, the spheres, from Chochmah up to Malchus, and they are totally involved in the shluchos of Mashiach. Each one of us has an aspect of Moshe Rabbeinu and an aspect of Mashiach within ourselves. Every Yid is a shaliach to serve Hashem, and was created just to serve Hashem and bring light and illuminate the world with the light and holiness and godliness. We can bring light in two ways, like the two luminaries, the sun and the moon. There's the large luminary, the sun, who is the mashpia, who gives. A yid has to give to the world. The second aspect is to be like the moon, to receive, to absorb the light and shine it from his physical body in the world. Like a student and a teacher, the teacher gives and the students can be batal and take from the teacher. But the good student, through his questions and his learning, can bring out from his teacher even more, which means he makes his teacher even wiser. These are the two concepts that must be present in a shaliach. One, he has to be nullified to the meshaleach, like the student who receives and reflects back to his teacher. And two, he has to have his own existence, his own mind and ideas and personality, yet he does the shlichus how Hashem wants him to. Each yid has the capacity to unite these factors and to be a shaliach. This is hinted at by the word shemesh, to give, and shamash, to serve. And when we go to serve Hashem, we receive everything that Hashem has. Everything the Meshaleach has, he is with us totally, that we should succeed in our shlichus. The Rebbe says that everything we need to do and the time of the Frierdiker Rebbe to redeem us is ready to start. All that's left to do is to greet Mashiach so he can fulfill his shlichus and actually take us out of galus. We must take upon ourselves to make a declaration that our work for each one of us is to greet Mashiach Tzidkenu. That all the details of shlichus and spreading Yiddishkeit and Mayanos Chutza have to be permeated with greeting Mashiach Tzidkenu, as well as that each action has to be for the purpose of greeting Mashiach. The name of the kinnis was Kol Yamei Chayecha, that each day and that everything you do has to be dedicated to bringing Mashiach, not only to adding and talking about it, but to actually bring it, meaning the shliach can't just stand there and be happy when Mashiach arrives on his own. But he has to bring the days of Mashiach, days in plural, the full redemption, until we live with Mashiach Vadai, actually. We need to make hachlatais tavais, meaning we have to first prepare ourselves and then prepare those in our city of shlichus. And the way to do this is to explain about the concept of Mashiach according to the Torah, each one in a way that is acceptable to him, each one according to his sechel, his ability and understanding, through the teaching of the concepts of Mashiach and Geula, especially in a way of chokhmah, bina, v'da'as, in a clear way. And this is shayach to everyone. There's not a yid that will not be touched by this. So if every shaliach does his job with all the 10 soul powers, and especially that the shluchim are all united, there will be shlach na biyad tishlach. And since the shaliach will be able to say that he has done everything that he can do, and that Hashem is also doing what he expects of us, he only asks us to do what he also does, we can demand shlach na biyad tishlach, that Hashem will bring Mashiach speedily in our days.